Joining us now is NewsCopter9 pilot Captain Bobby Ratliff. Captain Bobby, great to see you. And I think many of us remember that moment you saw the tornado, that iconic moment. Now, 25 years later, what do you recall as your first thoughts when you saw that tornado over Washington?
Unbelievable, Joe. It's the first tornado I've ever seen. And so I was stunned. I was at a loss for words. I think I said, I see it, I see it. And they said I would probably never live those words down. And I heard those words a bunch, but it was awe-inspiring. It was a very serious moment. And it was a moment that, we were looking for. It was a high likelihood of a tornado that day. And we went out to look for it.
Yeah, now the First Alert Storm Team, Denny Frary, Scott Lynn, Rob Cook, and I all tracking the storm from the Weather Lab. But as you said, you were up in the air that day. What was it like being in the air?
It looked far away, but it felt really close. It was mesmerizing, and it was fortunate that we spotted it there in Washington. And I just remember one thing. It was the smell. The smell of wet earth, like a plowed garden. I'll never forget the smell of the air and the moisture in that tornado. I assume it was pulling dirt into the sky, and it was creating this earthen smell.
So that's the first time you had that smell when you were in the air, and probably one of the only times, I would guess.
Yeah, it was surreal. It was, it's unnatural, and that's the fascination I think that people have when they see a tornado. It's not something that you expect to see, and it's so powerful, and it's doing things that you've never observed before. I saw objects in the sky, pieces of debris and tin circling near me, and so I'm trying to make my distance from the tornado, but then I'm also seeing objects moving about here and there, and I see its interaction with the ground. And that's how I stayed safe, is to see where is the earth moving, where is the soil being blown and disturbed by air or turbulence, and not to cross that line.
So with you seeing that debris in the air, which of course isn't natural to be flying around in, people, of course, we were worried about your safety. Were you at all scared when you were up watching that?
I was both concerned and, it's a mix. I wanted to do that for the people of Eastern Iowa. I wanted to find that tornado and show it and warn and educate. And personally, yes, I'd never seen a tornado before. I'm from the mountains of Virginia. Tornadoes are something that's fascinating. And in aviation, weather is a big part of aviation. Mm-hmm. You really, if you're going to be a pilot, you're going to have to be a student of the weather. That's what you and I had in common, Joe, remember?
Oh, yeah, and we always talked about and kind of positioned you in different places when you were out and about. Now, again, talk to me. I remember one specific quote you had at one point, something about, I think I'm going to land now because I'm seeing a barn or some piece of a barn at about 3,000 feet. What did you do? What did you see when you were tracking the tornado, and then what did you do at that point?
Well, when when I was flying next to the tornado, I maintained a distance to the southeast. Mm-hmm. So it was tracking to the northeast, and I would maintain a parallel course to the southeast. But it was pulling stuff off the ground. I'm sure it was a section of a machine shed or a barn, mm-hmm. tin. And I saw it because it was flickering in the sunshine, in the sunlight. And it really caught my eye, and it was closer to me than the tornado was.
And that's, of course, what you had to watch out for. Now, of course, the tornado went through, it passed. Then you were back in Washington, you were in Hills, you were in Lone Tree, and other communities. What do you recall about seeing in the hours and days after the tornado hit?
Well, I was shocked by the damage. I had never seen anything like that, and experiencing it in person is more serious than watching it on TV and being a part of it. And I felt good for spotting the tornado and capturing it on video, but I was not happy at all that that had happened to the good people of those towns.
So what was the damage like when you saw it from the air after that tornado passed?
Well, it's they make and we did, remember, we did several after that. Nothing as big, I think, as the Washington tornado, but some smaller ones. Certainly the ones that interact with crops later in the season, later in the tornado season. But they do make a specific effect on the ground, a circular effect. It really does spin objects in all directions. So whenever we had like derechos and straight line wind damage, Joe, if you remember, everything lays in one direction.
Yep.
When you have a tornado, it will throw stuff in a 360-degree direction. And it's like the fingerprint of a tornado.
So again, the Washington tornado was the first one that you captured live from NewsCopter 9, but as you mentioned, there were others. You went out storm chasing with the helicopter to find other tornadoes, but what specifically stands out about the Washington tornado compared to the others that you captured?
Well, I think it was the biggest. It was the first. It was the one that did the most damage, and I think it was the one we did the best job of predicting, Joe.
Mm-hmm. No, I would agree. It was definitely a high-risk day for storms, and you were in the absolute right place. And your and our coverage that day was credited with people taking action and seeking shelter, potentially saving lives that day. How does it make you feel looking back?
I'm very proud of that moment for us, that we did give that a high probability. I went out that morning. I called my dad and said, I'm going to go find, I think there'll be a tornado today. I'm going to go look for it. I did say that. And if you remember that morning, it was so hazy. There was so much water vapor in the air. It would almost look like a fog. And it was so warm. And, it was set up for some dangerous weather. So we knew something not good was going to happen.
So from a technical standpoint, how did you manage that day specifically to fly NewsCopter 9, point the camera, report live, and keep yourself safe all at the same time?
Something you can do in your 20s. I'm 55 now. I don't know about that. Yeah, that was I think I credit it to being a farm boy.
Mm-hmm.
I trained on a lot of farm equipment that required 10 things at once. And just 10 things at once became my forte.
And you were...
It's a lot to do, but we had a good team. We had good engineers and good technicians, and I had great mechanics working on the helicopter and engineers working on the camera systems. There was a team behind us that made that possible. It just wasn't, that was done live. That went live everywhere, and that was uncommon. That was a unique moment and a unique thing to have done way back all those years ago. Only my one regret is, man, I'd like to have one of these cameras they have now. We would have really could have showed some stuff with a modern camera.
Yeah, but the technology we had showed exactly what we needed to show at that moment. People stopped and just watched your video from that storm because it made it real. Any other memories or experiences from that day that you'd like to share with us?
It was just, people said that this moment would be, people at the station said this would be a big moment in my life, and I didn't really fully understand it. But here we are 25 years later, and I have to say, happily, they were right and I was wrong. It was a big moment, and I'm very proud of it. And I want to thank my family, my KCRG family, and my family back in Iowa that I still care about for making that possible.
Oh, no, absolutely. And we care about you still to this day. Now, first of all, I have one question for you. Do you still have your coat from Captain Bobby's days?
Well, you better believe I do.
That's awesome.
Here it is. And that's the one with me. It brought me a lot of good luck and a good fortune. And maybe it kept me safe.
Who knows?
It's maybe more powerful than we think.
It may have. Now, the question is, too, and people will want to know, what are you up to now? Are you still flying?
I'm taking a break. I was up in Washington, D.C., flying for NBC until about 2 years ago, and now I'm back home in the Blue Ridge Mountains, helping my family. And I've got a couple of kids, and we're doing great.
That's awesome to hear. And Bobby, 25 years later, we still hear about that day from our viewers. The I see it, I see it, I see it. We continue to hear that as well. It's always good to catch up with you. Thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your memories with us from that day in Washington.
Thank you so much. I love you guys.